To shoot professional content, lighting is everything. But what light should you buy? You could get a single point light source, you could get an LED panel light, you could get a tube light like this, or you could get a ring light. Oh wait, no, don't get a ring light. But what about modifiers? You could get a traditional softbox, you could get a lantern, you could get a diffusion panel, or you could get a silk sheet. So in this video, we're gonna make very specific recommendations on exactly what type of light you should buy. But before we do that, we need to touch on some of the core elements that actually make up good lighting. And the first one that you absolutely need to know before making a purchase is the difference between hard light and soft light. So this is what hard light looks like. And believe it or not, if you were to go online and buy a light right now, odds are when you take it out of the box and you turn it on, it's gonna look like this. It's not gonna be flattering. We really want to avoid hard light when it comes to lighting our subjects. Now, to contrast to the hard light you just saw, this is what soft light looks like. It's super flattering. It's not gonna show off the wrinkles on my face or any other imperfections. And the gradual fall off between the highlights and the shadows is just much nicer. Now, like I said a minute ago, almost all lights are gonna be hard straight out of the box. We turn them into soft lights by doing two things. The first is passing that light source through another medium, like a softbox. And then on top of that, we can increase the softness of a light by making the overall light source larger. Now, we just talked about softboxes and how we pass light through that medium, but look at what also happens to the size of the light source when it's going through the softbox. The entire size increases a ton, which also contributes to the softness. So we just talked about how increasing the size of your light source is gonna add additional softness to it. This is where the size of your softbox also comes into play. Ideally, you wanna get a huge softbox. It's just gonna make for a much softer light. But you obviously have to consider the fact that larger softboxes cost more money, and you also have to have enough room to fit the softbox. So what you're seeing right now is a 65 centimeter softbox from Newer with a grid on it that makes the light even more directional. Now, on the other hand, this is a 120 centimeter softbox. It is freaking massive, and it's giving off a much softer light than the smaller one we had before. Not that this was bad, but comparing and contrasting, you can see big is better. So size matters, but distance also matters a ton, because you can have a huge softbox like I have right now. Up close, it's gonna give you an amazing light, but watch what happens as Luke begins to move that softbox back. So before it was about an arm's length away, now it's probably 3 to 4 arms lengths away. It's obviously gotten dimmer because we're not anywhere near as close, but the light's also getting harder because in proximity to me, that light source is now smaller. So to summarize all this, in a perfect world, you want the biggest softbox possible as close to your subject as possible. And if you have to move your softbox further away, you want to make that light source bigger and bigger. This is why in Hollywood movies and huge commercial sets, they have massive diffusion sources causing their light sources to be huge. It's also why the sun, the largest light in our solar system, is actually a hard light because it's just so freaking far away. So that's the difference between hard and soft light and how we use diffusion sources like softboxes to achieve the soft look. But softboxes aren't the only way to get light to be soft. And this brings us to the next core element of lighting, which is what's the best modifier for you? So we touched on it, but up first you have softboxes. These are like the all-American diffusion kit. They come in tons of different shapes and styles, from octabox to parabolic to rectangular and strip. For the most part, all you need to know is that these make your light soft, and you want to get the biggest one that's going to fit in your filming space. The other thing on top of that is the grid system that you can see on the softbox. This is actually an attachment, and all it does is it focuses the light. You can see in some of the examples we're showing right now, with the grid attached, we control the light spill and we focus it way more on the subject. Without the grid, you're going to see that light spilling onto the walls, the background. It is just a less focused scene, which isn't always bad. In fact, sometimes people opt for that, and that's when they would get something like a lantern softbox. This is very different. It's covered in diffusion material all around. What that's gonna do is cast light in all different directions. It's gonna light an entire scene. It's great for multiple people that all need to be lit when you only have one light source. And on top of that, due to the size and shape of this thing, you are gonna get an incredibly soft light, and it really does look good, but you need to be aware it's gonna spill everywhere. And then last but not least, a traditional style of diffusing light is using a diffusion panel like this. Usually it's silk, nylon, tons of different materials. This is from a 5-in-1 reflector kit. You can get it for like $20 on Amazon. All you need to do is place this in between your subject and your light. You're gonna get really nice diffusion. It's helpful because it's really thin, and this can fit in some areas where maybe one of these two just wouldn't be an option. Just keep in mind, if you use this or any other type of nylon sheet, you're gonna need another human being to hold it, or you're gonna need another stand with this actually clipped onto it. Now, the third thing you need to be aware of when buying a high quality light is the right color mode for you. Now, generally speaking, there are 3 types of color modes that you want to be aware of. The first one is daylight balanced. Now, this light is capable of doing all 3 modes, but we're going to walk through each one individually. So if you buy a daylight balanced light, this is all you're going to get. 5600 Kelvin. It's called daylight balanced. It's the same color temperature as the sun. And even though you're limited in flexibility, this is going to be a budget-friendly color temperature to buy. And most of the talking head videos you see on the internet, especially on YouTube, they're all filmed at this color temperature. Now, the second type of color mode is bicolor. And what this allows you to do is shift the color temperature between cool white and very warm white. You can see I have a little dial on the back here, and I can switch the color temperature, and now we have a much warmer light. Outside of being able to create different styles and looks with the more flexible color temperatures, this is really key when you're filming in an area that has different color temperature lights. And when we're filming in my kitchen, we can show exactly how this works. Normally, I'm using a 5600 Kelvin light, but we have these orange pendant lights in the background. And because these 2 colors just clash with each other, it makes the entire background look crazy orange. With a bicolor light as my key light, I'm able to turn the color temperature down to match the warmer color temperature of those background lights. Now, both the background and the foreground look orange, but this is where we can change the white balance setting on our camera to match that same color temperature, 2700 Kelvin, essentially telling our camera to interpret that as natural white, which balances out the entire scene. So now hopefully you can see the benefit of bicolor is the ability to match other lights in your scene and have greater control. The only drawbacks of bicolor lights is that A, they're usually more expensive, and B, you're actually going to miss out on some of the output or light intensity compared to a daylight only balanced light. And this is actually really easy to see with this LED panel. When you look at this array, we have all of these individual LEDs. When I change the color temperature, you can actually see certain LEDs turning off and others turning on. And that is because half of the LEDs are warm and half of them are cool. So at any given point, you're only using half of the actual LEDs on this light. If you put it exactly in the middle, you can see most of the LEDs are on. We can kind of get it to a point where there's more LEDs than not, but overall you're gonna have to sacrifice a little bit on the output when buying a bicolor light. Then finally, the third color mode when buying a light is full color RGB. I can hit the mode button on the back here. With full color RGB lights, you have the ability to essentially change the actual color to be anything that you want, red, green, blue, and everything in between. This is super cool because it gives you a lot of creative control. You can use this in the background of your scenes to evoke different emotions. And overall, it's just a ton of flexibility. The only negative of a light like this is they're usually going to be much more expensive than daylight only and bicolor lights. All right, now we can finally talk about core element number 4 when buying a high quality light, and that's the actual type of light. Which one is right for you? Now, I know I joked about it earlier in this video, but we should talk about why ring lights aren't really on this list. Generally speaking, they're just not made of high quality lights. These can kind of cast awkward color tones onto your skin, which don't make you look good. They're also small and hard light sources that are hard to diffuse because they don't have universal mounting options on them. You can't just attach a softbox to a ring light. And then finally, they're also designed to have a smartphone mounted right in the center of the ring, meaning the light is going to blast you right in the face. This is called broad lighting, which traditionally in film isn't a cinematic look. Instead, you want to light off to the side like I have now, creating a bright side and a dark side of your face. This creates more depth, which is a more cinematic look. The first is a single point light. This is probably the most purchased light amongst the YouTuber and kind of professional freelance videographer community. They are extremely versatile. You can get them on a great budget. And my favorite thing about them is the fact that they have the universal Bowens mount on the front. These are a really simple design, but they essentially allow you to buy any softbox or light modifier on the internet and attach it to your light without having to worry about brand compatibility. This means you get a ton of power out of these lights and a lot of flexibility as to what you're capable of doing with it. Now, after single point lights, I would say the next most popular is something like this right here. This is an LED panel. Now, the way I look at comparing these two comes down to a few simple things. The first is that straight out of the box, this is a much larger light source compared to this one. And remember back to the beginning of this video, larger light sources are typically softer. So straight out of the box, when you turn this guy on, it's gonna be slightly softer than this light. But I don't want you to think that this is just gonna be like amazingly soft and super flattering. You're still gonna need to add more diffusion to it. Now, this brings me to one of my major cons with LED panels is that they don't have that universal Bowens mount. So adding diffusion to this, although very easy and still possible, it is a little bit more difficult. You either need to get a custom softbox that's made specifically for the LED panel, or you need to get some sort of separate modifier like a diffusion panel, a silk or a nylon sheet, have that mounted on another stand, and then you have a diffused light. So all that aside, the major benefit of LED panels compared to single point light sources is this right here. Look at how thin this one is compared to this. And I think most people should buy a single point light unless you're in an area where space is very restricted and you can't fit something like a single point light with a softbox. Then you could get, whoa ho ho, what do we got going on here? Turn that guy off. Then you could get one of these, maybe mount a very slim diffusion panel in front of it, and you have a better space-saving lighting kit. And then finally, we have the tube lights like this TL120C, is that what it is? I forget the actual name, we'll have it linked below. Tube lights are extremely versatile. They're usually pretty large and have a relatively soft light. I'd say softer than both of these straight out of the box, depending on how big the tube light is. I love tube lights. I don't think they should be your first light. You should probably get one of these. But if you're looking for your second or maybe your third light and you want something that you can use as a practical light in the scene, you can use to light your background or as a corner light, just something that's gonna fit in all of these different weird places that traditional lights wouldn't be able to. Tube lights are great and they're definitely gaining popularity, and I highly recommend this model from Newer. Okay, those are the core 4 elements that you should be aware of. Right now, we're gonna rapid fire some secondary things to consider before finally bringing this home with some ultra specific recommendations based on the type of content you're trying to film. Okay, rapid fire, starting now. While you're searching for lights, you will see 2 specs called the CRI and the TLCI. These stand for Color Rendering Index and Television Lighting Consistency Index. It's basically a measurement of the color accuracy of your light. Both are measured on a scale of 0 to 100, and ideally you want the light that you purchase to be at 95 and up for both specs. Thankfully, nowadays, most lights are at or above these requirements. After that, we have the wattage and light output. Wattage is a measurement of the total amount of power that the light will draw as it runs, and typically speaking, the higher the wattage, the more output and light intensity that the light will have. Output is measured in lux at a certain distance, usually 1 meter. So for an example, 4,000 lux at 1 meter, it's gonna be more than enough for YouTube videos like this or talking head interviews. 30,000 lux at 1 meter is very bright, enough to fully illuminate a very big space. And then 90,000 lux at 1 meter is enough to wake up a demon from the underworld. This is what you'd use to essentially mimic the sun in an outdoor shoot where the natural light from the sun had already faded. Now, speaking of power draw, the next thing we need to talk about is the ability to work off of a battery. If you're always filming indoors next to an outlet, it's not really a huge concern for you, but if you're ever gonna be in a situation where you're away from power outlets, it would make sense to have a light that can work off of a battery. Some lights have internal batteries built in that'll work for a couple hours. Other lights have the ability to work off of industry standard batteries like Sony NP or V-mount batteries. This is nice because you can stack up a ton of them and make sure that the light will work for hours. Up next, you're gonna wanna consider if you need special lighting effects modes. A lot of modern lights nowadays have these different modes built into them that mirror unique lighting scenarios in real life, like cop cars, candlelight or fires, paparazzi taking your picture, dance parties, that sort of thing. These definitely aren't essential, but if you're filming more narrative style stuff, they are very helpful. Up next, we have to talk about an app interface. A lot of lights nowadays actually have these apps that will allow you to control the light without having to touch the light. Not essential, but definitely helpful if you're like me, where you're constantly filming yourself by yourself. This way I can sit down, I can pull up the app, I can change the light intensity, the color temperature, any of that stuff while seeing how it looks on camera, instead of having to go behind the light, change the settings, record a test clip, review it, and so on and so forth. And that officially covers all of the primary and all of the secondary things that you need to be aware of prior to making an informed purchase. Now we can finally dive into those specific light recommendations. But first, if you found this style of in-depth training valuable, hit that like and subscribe button. And on top of that, if you like this, I definitely think you should check out our full online course for content creators, 14-Day Filmmaker. It contains over 150 streamlined video tutorials walking through every single aspect of the content creation process, from the technical side of what's the best gear to use, the right camera settings, how to light like a pro, capture cinematic movements, record and edit high-quality audio, how to tell captivating stories, and an insane amount of editing training that will take you from a beginner to an absolute ninja. Included in this course are individual bonus courses that talk about mastering the process of shooting and editing on your smartphone, a deep dive course on professional cameras, and an entire curriculum on mastering YouTube, covering how to get tons of views and build an amazing subscriber base. Lifetime access to all of that and the weekly Q&A calls that I personally host, the bonus sound effects, the editing cheat sheets, all of that is just $48. If you're interested and you want to learn more and maybe enroll, the link to do so is in the description of this video, which I think YouTube, if you're on a desktop, just moved it to the right-hand side of your screen. Either way, back to the recommendations. Let's start from the bottom and talk about the most affordable lighting kit that's actually worth the money. For under $50, you can get the Mount Dog Light and Softbox kit. If you're just getting started shooting videos for maybe a YouTube channel, so your social media, or you're shooting interviews with local businesses, this is gonna get you moving in the right direction. The softbox is big enough to really give off a flattering soft light. It's got enough power to light up a subject, assuming you've got it relatively close to the person. And it's also bicolor, which really is what sets this apart from most other lights in the same price range. Most other lights are daylight only. Not to mention the light also comes with a light stand, these are usually sold separately, and its own carrying case. Now, for those of you looking to get a more professional setup, the next light I'd point you towards is the newer CB60B. Coming in at around $130, this is still a super affordable light, all things considered, but compared to the Mount Dog kit, we've really cranked up the power and features quite a bit. With 70 watt power draw, this light can produce 34,000 lux at 1 meter, which is extremely bright for a light of this size and price, and it's also a bicolor light. Due to the fact that it's a single point light source, it's gonna have that universal Bowens mount, so you can attach practically any softbox or modifier. It's gonna be compatible with the newer app, which means you can control it from your smartphone. And it has 12 built-in lighting effect modes like lightning, paparazzi, candlelight, TV screen, and more. Now, do keep in mind with this light, it doesn't include a softbox, so that's something you're gonna need to purchase separately. Speaking of which though, what type of softbox should you buy? Well, I think if you're a YouTuber, a traditional 90 centimeter octagon softbox is perfect. Now, if you want to splurge a little bit more and you have a bigger space to film in, you could use the 120 centimeter option that I use. It's going to give you a softer light source, but you definitely want to consider just how big this thing is. Make sure it's going to fit in your space, and you're also going to need a heavier duty light stand like a C-stand to keep it from tipping over. Now, if you're anything like me and you actually hate light stands because they clutter up your filming area, you can get these newer wall mounts. I have 2 of them in my office and I absolutely love them. Now, if you still need even more power than that, maybe you're in a huge room and you just need a lot of light, the newer CB100C is actually one of the lights that I use, and it is incredible. It gives you all the same features as the previous light we covered, but it's more powerful and it's also full color RGB. Now, changing dynamic here, if you're in a tight space and size is really going to be an issue, this is where a high quality LED panel will serve you nicely. On the budget friendly side, you've got the newer NL288 LED panel. This actually has diffusion built right into the LED panel, which is nice. I will say though, don't expect it to get as soft as the earlier options with larger softboxes, but as a compromise with the smaller form factor, it's definitely a great option, and it's also bicolor, which is great. Now, if you have a little bit more money to spend on an LED panel, my personal favorite and the one that I use is the Amaran P60C. Amaran is definitely a slightly more expensive brand, but they're gonna give you super high quality build quality, The light output is really powerful for something of this size at 5,900 lux. It has tons of built-in special effects modes, and it's full RGB, giving you total control of whatever color you want to create. But overall, my favorite aspect of this LED panel is that it's one of the only LED panels that comes with a dedicated softbox and grid system. This means you're gonna have a much softer light source compared to all the other LED panels with built-in diffusion or none whatsoever. Okay, moving on, let's say you're in a scenario where you've got multiple people that you need to light and you've only got one light. This is where a lantern softbox would come into play. Just keep in mind you're gonna wanna get a single point light source with a Bowens mount to use the lantern. Lanterns are also really good for real estate shoots where you want to light up an entire room with a nice soft light. They're also really great for talking head looks. They're just a different style than the softbox and grid system we talked about earlier. The scene you're watching right now is actually me using a lantern, and it's ultra soft. I love how it looks, but it does really light up the whole room. Then finally, I know we talked about tube lights earlier, and I already covered how it's probably not the best light if you're in the market for your first light. But if you want something that's super cool and versatile that you can use in tons of different scenes as both key lights, fill lights, even practical lights within the background, they're just a ton of fun. And I do think as a second or third light, tube lights are crazy good options to look into. That does it though. As always, links to all of this gear can be found in the description of the YouTube video. Other than that, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to check out 14 Day Filmmaker, and I'll see you in the next one.